Get him off this plane, now! I will not have my safety compromised by some street thug who clearly stole a ticket. The voice shrieked through the first-class cabin, shattering the peace before takeoff. Every head turned. There stood a woman dripping in diamonds, pointing a manicured finger at a 17-year-old boy in a hoodie who was simply trying to listen to music. She thought she had the power. She thought she could crush him with a word. But what she didn't know was that the man walking up the jet bridge behind her wasn't just another passenger. He was the one man who could end her entire lifestyle with a single phone call. And he was about to teach her a lesson the entire world would never forget. The rain lashed against the reinforced glass of John F. Kennedy International Airport, blurring the runway lights into streaks of neon amber and red. Inside the exclusive lounge of Zenith Airways, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the storm brewing outside, hushed, scented with expensive leather and freshly ground coffee, and populated by men and women in tailored suits checking stocks on their tablets. Among them sat Leo. Leo Banks was 17 years old. He was wearing a faded charcoal grey hoodie, loose-fitting jeans, and a pair of worn-out sneakers that had seen better days. He had a pair of large, noise-cancelling headphones resting around his neck, and his eyes were glued to a beat-up sketchbook resting on his knees. To the casual observer, and there were many judgmental observers in the lounge that evening, Leo looked entirely out of place. He looked like someone who had wandered in from the bus terminal by mistake. He kept his head down, acutely aware of the side eyes he was receiving. The security guard at the entrance had checked his boarding pass 3 times, holding it up to the light, scanning the QR code, and then scanning it again, frowning as if the machine had made a mistake. "First class?" The guard had grunted, looking Leo up and down. "Yes, sir," Leo had replied, his voice soft but steady. "Seat 1A? That's the bulkhead. Most expensive seat on the plane." "I know." The guard had eventually let him through, but not before muttering something into his radio. Leo was used to it. He was a tall black teenager, with broad shoulders and a quiet demeanor. In the world of high finance and luxury travel, he was treated like a glitch in the system. Leo wasn't there to make a scene. He was tired. It had been an exhausting week in New York, filled with meetings he wasn't technically old enough to lead, forcing him to rely on his legal proxies. He just wanted to get home to London. He adjusted his backpack, which contained a laptop worth more than most of the cars parked outside, and walked toward the boarding gate as the announcement chimed. Zenith Airways Flight 404 to London Heathrow is now boarding first-class passengers. Leo stood up. He was the first in line. The gate agent, a kind-faced woman named Sarah, smiled at him. She didn't blink at his attire. She simply scanned his pass. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Banks. Right this way." "Thank you, Sarah," Leo said, reading her name tag. He walked down the jet bridge, the cool air of the tunnel hitting his face. He loved airplanes. He loved the engineering, the physics, the sheer miracle of putting 300 people in a metal tube and shooting them across the ocean. He stepped onto the plane, turned left, and found seat 1A. It was a suite, really, a private pod with a sliding door, a lie-flat bed, and a massive entertainment screen. Leo tossed his backpack into the overhead bin, settled into the soft leather seat, and exhaled. He put his headphones on, not playing any music yet, just dulling the ambient noise of the cabin crew prepping the galley. He closed his eyes, hoping for a peaceful flight. He hoped to sleep for the full 7 hours. He had no idea that peace was the last thing he was going to get. About 5 minutes later, the thumping of heavy footsteps vibrated through the floor. A distinct, sharp clacking of high heels followed. The scent of overpowering perfume, something floral and cloying, wafted into Leo's pod before the person even arrived. "I don't understand why the lounge service was so slow today," a woman's voice complained, loud and grating. I specifically asked for the champagne to be chilled to 40 degrees, not 42. It tastes like dishwater. Leo opened one eye. Standing in the aisle, blocking the flow of other passengers, was a woman who looked like she was dressed for a gala rather than a flight. She wore a tweed Chanel suit, a pearl necklace that looked heavy enough to anchor a boat, and oversized sunglasses, even though it was night. This was Mrs. Patricia Gables. Patricia Gables was the wife of a hedge fund manager, a socialite who spent her days on committees and her nights judging people she deemed inferior. She held her boarding pass like a royal decree. She stopped at row 1, looking for Seat 1B, which was directly across the aisle from Leo. She began to stow her Louis Vuitton carry-on, struggling to lift it. A flight attendant rushed to help her. "Careful with that," Patricia snapped. "That leather is custom. If you scratch it, you're buying it." "Of course, ma'am," the attendant said, visibly tense. Patricia dusted off her hands and turned to take her seat. That was when she saw Leo. She froze. Her sunglasses slid down her nose slightly as she peered over the rim. She blinked, once, twice. Then she looked at the seat number, 1A, then back at Leo. Leo felt her stare. He slowly removed his headphones and offered a polite, small nod. "Evening." Patricia didn't respond to the greeting. She turned sharply to the flight attendant. "Excuse me? Miss?" "Yes, Mrs. Gables. Can I get you a pre-departure beverage?" "No, you can get me an explanation," Patricia hissed, pointing a diamond-encrusted finger at Leo. "What is that doing in here?" The flight attendant, a young man named David, looked confused. "I'm sorry. You mean Mr. Banks?" "I don't care what its name is," Patricia said, her voice rising in volume. "I mean, why is there a teenager in a hoodie in first class? This isn't the basketball court. Did he sneak in? Is he lost?" Leo's jaw tightened. He gripped the armrests of his seat. "Don't engage," he told himself. "Just let it go." "Mr. Banks has a ticket, ma'am," David said firmly. "He is seated in 1A. "Impossible," Patricia scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Look at him. He looks like a thug. He probably used a stolen credit card or he's waiting to rob us once we're in the air. I paid $12,000 for this seat, for peace and exclusivity. I did not pay to sit next to the help." The cabin had gone silent. The other first-class passengers, a tech CEO in 2A, an older couple in 2B and 2C, were all watching. Leo sighed, a deep, weary sound. He turned his head to face her. "Ma'am," Leo said, his voice calm, educated and refined, a sharp contrast to the street voice she likely expected. "I paid for my ticket just like you. I'm just trying to get to London. Please, sit down." Patricia's face turned a shade of crimson. It wasn't embarrassment. It was rage. The fact that he spoke to her as an equal, with perfect diction, seemed to offend her more than if he had shouted. "Don't you speak to me!" she spat. "You don't belong here. You belong in the back, near the toilets, or better yet, on a bus." She turned to David, snapping her fingers. "Check his ticket again. Now, I want to see proof." The atmosphere in the cabin was suffocating. The air conditioning was humming, but it felt like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. David, the flight attendant, was in a difficult position. Zenith Airways prided itself on customer service, which usually meant the customer is always right, but Zenith also had strict policies against harassment. "Mrs. Gables," David said, lowering his voice to a soothing tone. "I checked Mr. Banks's boarding pass myself at the door. Everything is in order. We are about to close the doors for departure. Please, I must ask you to take your seat." "I will not take my seat," Patricia shouted, stomping her foot like a petulant child. "Do you know who my husband is? My husband is Gerald Gables. He knows the vice president of operations for this airline. If I tell him that I was forced to sit next to a potential criminal, you will be fired. He will be thrown in jail. This is a security risk." She whipped out her phone. "I'm recording this. I'm going to send this to everyone." She pointed the camera lens right in Leo's face. The flash went off, blinding him for a second. Leo held up a hand. "Please don't film me." "I'll do whatever I want," she screamed. "Look at this," she narrated to her phone screen. "Zenith Airways is letting riffraff into first class. Safety is gone. Decency is gone. I am feeling threatened right now. He's looking at me aggressively." Leo hadn't moved a muscle. He was sitting perfectly still, his sketchbook closed on his lap. From row 2, the tech CEO, a man named Roger, leaned forward. "Hey, lady, give it a rest. The kid isn't doing anything." Patricia whirled on him. "Mind your own business. You're probably part of the problem. This is about standards. If we let them in here," she gestured wildly at Leo, "then the value of everything goes down. It's basic economics." She turned back to Leo, her eyes narrowing into slits. She leaned over the aisle, invading his personal space. "Listen to me, boy," she sneered. "I know your type. You think because you scrounged up enough cash for a ticket, or maybe won some contest, that you're one of us? You're not. You're dirt on a silk sheet. Now be a good little boy, grab your bag, and move to economy. If you do it now, I won't call the police when we land." Leo looked her dead in the eyes. "No." The word hung in the air. Simple. Final. Patricia gasped, as if she'd been slapped. "Excuse me?" "I said no," Leo repeated. "I am sitting in seat 1A. I am staying in seat 1A. If you have a problem with that, you can get off the plane." It was the tipping point. Patricia Gables lost whatever shred of composure she had left. She began to scream, essentially throwing a tantrum. She grabbed her heavy Chanel bag and swung it, not hitting Leo, but slamming it onto the floor of the aisle with a thud that shook the cabin. "Captain!" she shrieked. "I want the captain! I want this plane stopped! I want the marshals!" David pressed the call button for the purser, the head of the cabin crew. A moment later, a stern-looking woman named Nancy arrived from the galley. "What is the problem here?" Nancy asked, her voice steel. "The problem," Patricia panted, pointing a shaking finger at Leo, "is that this person threatened me. He said he was going to hurt me if I didn't move. I want him removed immediately." It was a blatant lie. Everyone in the cabin knew it. "That's not true," Roger from row 2 called out. "She's making it up. He's lying too," Patricia yelled. "They're ganging up on a defenseless woman." Nancy looked at Leo. Leo looked back, his expression calm, but his eyes showing a flicker of hurt. It was the hurt of someone who had experienced this scenario a dozen times before. "Mom," Nancy said to Patricia, "if you continue to raise your voice, we will have to deplane you." "You wouldn't dare," Patricia hissed. "My husband generates millions in revenue for the banks that own this airline. You touch me, and you'll never work in the sky again. I want this thug gone. Now. Or I will sue this airline into bankruptcy." The standoff was intense. The plane was still at the gate, but the door was about to close. The pilots were running their pre-flight checks, unaware of the war zone in the front cabin. Suddenly, there was a commotion at the front of the plane. The gate agent, Sarah, ran down the jet bridge, looking breathless. She stepped onto the plane and whispered something urgently to Nancy. Nancy's eyes went wide. She looked from Sarah to the empty seat next to Patricia, and then to the door. "Wait," Nancy whispered back. "He's coming now." "He's already on the bridge," Sarah said, her face pale. Patricia, sensing the shift in attention, crossed her arms triumphantly. "See? The authorities are coming. Finally. Someone with some sense." She looked down at Leo with a smug, twisted smile. Game over, kid. Back to the ghetto with you. Heavy, authoritative footsteps echoed from the jet bridge. They were slow, deliberate, and commanded respect. A man stepped onto the plane. He wasn't the police. He wasn't a marshal. He was a man in his late 50s, wearing a bespoke navy suit that cost more than Patricia's entire wardrobe. He had silver hair, piercing blue eyes, and an energy that made the air in the cabin feel heavier. He carried a leather briefcase and walked with a cane that had a silver handle shaped like a falcon. It was Thomas Wright. The Thomas Wright. The billionaire industrialist. The man who owned the conglomerate that had just acquired Zenith Airways 3 months ago. He was the owner in the truest sense of the word. Patricia Gables's jaw dropped. She recognized him instantly from the covers of Forbes and Fortune. Her demeanor shifted in a split second from banshee to sycophant. "Oh my God," she breathed, smoothing down her skirt. "Mr. Wright. What an honor." Thomas Wright didn't even look at her. He stopped in the aisle, his tall frame looming over the scene. He looked at the distressed flight attendants. He looked at the bag thrown on the floor. He looked at Patricia. And then his gaze landed on Leo. Leo looked up, and for the first time since the ordeal began, a small, genuine smile touched his lips. "You're late," Leo said. Patricia let out a strangled laugh. "Did you hear that, Mr. Wright? This thug just insulted you. Don't worry, I've already demanded the crew remove him. We can—" "Be quiet," Thomas Wright said. His voice wasn't loud, but it silenced her instantly. It was a voice of absolute power. Thomas turned fully to Patricia. "Did you just call him a thug?" "Well, yes," Patricia stammered, sensing something was wrong but too arrogant to stop. "Look at him. He's obviously not. He doesn't belong in first class. I was just trying to protect the standards of your airline, Mr. Wright." Thomas stared at her for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he did something that made Patricia's blood run cold. He turned to the teenager in the hoodie, bowed his head slightly, and said, "I apologize for the delay, sir, and I apologize for the behavior of this passenger. Shall we have her removed so we can discuss the merger?" Patricia's eyes bulged. "Sir." "Merger?" Leo unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up. He stood tall, matching Thomas Wright's height. He adjusted his hoodie, but suddenly the posture wasn't that of a tired teen. It was the posture of a boss. "It's okay, Thomas," Leo said, his voice dropping the defensiveness and assuming command. "But she is right about one thing." Leo turned his cold gaze to Patricia. "Someone on this plane doesn't belong here." The cabin of the Airbus A350 was pressurized, but for Patricia Gables it felt like all the air had been sucked into a vacuum. The ambient noise of the engines spooling up was a distant hum compared to the roaring of blood in her ears. Leo's words hung in the air, heavy with implication. "Someone on this plane doesn't belong here." Patricia blinked rapidly, her brain trying to recalibrate a reality that had just violently shifted on its axis. She looked at Thomas Wright, the titan of industry, a man whose net worth was greater than the GDP of some small nations, standing deferentially before the teenager in the scuffed sneakers. "I don't understand," Patricia whispered, her voice losing its abrasive edge and shaking with genuine confusion. "Mr. Wright, you apologized to him. He was sitting in your seat." Thomas Wright didn't look at her. He looked at Nancy, the purser. "Nancy? Is seat 1B still available?" Nancy nodded quickly. "Yes, Mr. Wright. It was reserved for you. But we assumed you were missing the flight, so Mrs. Gables was about to occupy it." "Excellent," Thomas said. He stepped past Patricia as if she were a piece of misplaced luggage. He placed his briefcase on the console of Seat 1B, the seat directly across the aisle from Leo, and sat down. He stretched his legs, rested his silver-handled cane against the cabin wall, and buckled his seatbelt. Only then did he turn his steely blue gaze toward Patricia, who was still standing in the aisle, clutching her Chanel bag to her chest like a life-preserver. "Mrs. Gables," Thomas said coldly, "you seem labor under a significant misapprehension. Seat 1A does not belong to me. Seat 1A belongs to Mr. Banks. In fact, this entire aircraft, in a manner of speaking, currently belongs to Mr. Banks." Patricia felt faint. "What?" Leo finally moved. He sat back down in seat 1A, his movements fluid and relaxed. He picked up his noise-cancelling headphones but didn't put them on. He just rested them around his neck, looking at Patricia with an expression of profound disappointment. "Thomas is exaggerating slightly," Leo said, his voice calm, deep, and infinitely more mature than it had seemed 10 minutes ago. "I don't own the plane. Yet. But my company just acquired a 51% controlling stake in the software division that runs the navigation and logistics systems for Thomas's entire fleet, including Zenith Airways." He paused, letting the information sink in. "I'm not here to steal a seat, Patricia. I'm flying to London to sign the final paperwork that keeps your husband's favorite airline in the sky. Thomas was kind enough to meet me here, so we could go over the final points during the flight." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the tech CEO in row 2 stopped tapping on his phone. The older couple in 2B and 2C were staring open-mouthed. Patricia Gables's world crumbled. She wasn't just wrong. She was catastrophically, career-endingly wrong. She had just called the new boss a thug. "But you're a child," she stammered, grasping at straws. "You're wearing a hoodie." Leo glanced down at his attire. "It's comfortable. I've been coding for 36 hours straight to fix a bug that would have grounded every flight on the eastern seaboard this weekend. I didn't have time to change into a suit to impress people whose opinions don't matter to me." He looked back up at her, his eyes hardening. "My bank account doesn't care what I wear, Patricia, and neither does the algorithm I built that just saved Thomas's company $50 million in fuel costs this quarter alone." Thomas Wright leaned forward, his voice a low rumble. "Mr. Banks is 17 years old. He is also a prodigy. He is the founder and CEO of Apex Solutions, and he is the most important person on this aircraft. Now, Mrs. Gables, you have delayed us enough. The doors are closed. We are pushing back. You have 2 choices." He held up 2 fingers. 1. You take your actual assigned seat, which I believe is 14D in Economy Plus, and you remain silent for the duration of this flight. 2. We return to the gate, and I have you arrested for interfering with a flight crew and harassment under federal aviation regulations. Patricia looked around wildly. The flight attendants, David and Nancy, were looking at her with a mixture of pity and professional disdain. There were no allies here. Her husband's name meant nothing. Her diamonds meant nothing. Tears of humiliation welled in her eyes. Not genuine remorse, but the stinging, bitter tears of a bully who had finally punched the wrong victim. "But my bags are already up here," she whimpered. "David will bring them back to you once we reach cruising altitude," Thomas said dismissively. "Move." Now, it was the longest walk of Patricia Gables's life. Clutching her purse, she had to turn and squeeze past Thomas Wright, then walk past Leo Banks. Leo didn't even look at her. He had already opened his sketchbook again, dismissed her from his reality. As she crossed the threshold from first class into the business cabin, and then further back toward economy, she felt the eyes of every passenger on her. News travels fast on a plane. The whispers had already started. She found seat 14D. It was a middle seat. As she squeezed into the narrow space, wedged between a large man asleep with his mouth open and a crying toddler, the plane lurched backward. The engines roared to life. Patricia Gables was trapped in a metal tube at 35,000 feet for the next 7 hours with the two men who now held her entire existence in the palm of their hands, and the flight hadn't even begun. The seatbelt sign made a cheerful bing sound as Zenith Airways Flight 404 leveled off at cruising altitude above the Atlantic. The cabin lights in first class shifted to a soothing, ambient blue. For Leo Banks in 1A, the tension of the takeoff began to ebb away. He stretched his arms. He was exhausted, but the adrenaline of the encounter had woken him up. Across the aisle, Thomas Wright ordered a scotch. Neat. He swirled the amber liquid in the heavy crystal glass and looked at Leo with a mixture of respect and apology. "Leo, I cannot apologize enough," Thomas said, his voice low so as not to disturb the other passengers, though everyone was straining to listen anyway. "That woman, Gerald Gables, is a minor nuisance in the financial sector, a middleman who thinks he's a kingmaker. His wife has a reputation, but I never imagined she'd display such naked bigotry on my own aircraft." Leo shrugged, finally pulling off his hoodie to reveal a simple, charcoal-colored t-shirt underneath. "It's fine, Thomas. I'm used to it. Sad to say, but it's not the first time someone thought I was robbing the place just by showing up." "It shouldn't happen," Thomas insisted. "Especially not here. Zenith was supposed to be the gold standard." "Standards slip when people think nobody is watching," Leo said sagely. He accepted a bottle of sparkling water from Nancy, who served him with trembling hands. She was terrified she might have offended him earlier by not defending him faster. "Thank you, Nancy," Leo said gently, sensing her fear. "You did a good job. It was a tough situation." Nancy nearly cried with relief. "Thank you, Mr. Banks. Can I get you anything else? Anything at all?" "I'm good for now." Leo turned back to Thomas. "So, the integration operational timeline. I have some concerns about the London data center." They began to talk business. For 20 minutes, they were just two high-powered executives discussing a multi-billion-dollar merger. They spoke a language of acronyms, profit margins, and infrastructural redundancies. Roger, the tech CEO in row 2, listened in awe, realizing that the kid in the hoodie was running circles around Thomas Wright when it came to technical strategy. Suddenly, Thomas stopped mid-sentence. He seemed to remember something. He tapped the intercom button on his seat. "Nancy, could you please ask Mrs. Gables to join us in the first-class cabin for a moment?" Leo raised an eyebrow. "What are you doing, Thomas?" "We have 7 hours, Leo, and I don't like loose ends. She insulted you. She insulted my company, and she used her husband's name as a weapon. I think we need to clarify the new pecking order." Leo considered this. Part of him just wanted to sleep. But another part, the part of him that had worked twice as hard to get half as far, the part that had endured a lifetime of Patricia Gables looking down their noses at him, knew Thomas was right. This wasn't just about her. It was about setting a precedent. "All right," Leo said quietly. "Bring her up." A few minutes later, the curtain separating business from first parted. Patricia Gables appeared. She looked wildly different than she had an hour ago. Her makeup was smudged beneath her eyes. Her expensive Chanel suit looked wrinkled. She had lost her sunglasses, revealing red-rimmed, terrified eyes. She stood at the front of the cabin, trembling like a schoolgirl sent to the principal's office. "Sit," Thomas said, gesturing to the small ottoman seat at the foot of his own pod. It was uncomfortable and low to the ground, forcing her to literally look up at them. Patricia sat, clutching her hands together in her lap. Thomas took a slow sip of his scotch. "Mrs. Gables, Mr. Banks and I were just discussing risk management. You, unfortunately, have become a significant risk." I don't understand, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I apologized. I moved seats. You moved because I forced you to, Thomas corrected. And you haven't apologized to Mr. Banks. You just acted shocked that he had power. Thomas turned to Leo. Leo, the floor is yours. What would you like to know? Leo turned his seat slightly, so he was facing her directly. He didn't look angry. He looked studious, like he was examining a particularly nasty piece of code that needed debugging. Why? Leo asked simply. Patricia swallowed hard. Why what? When I walked on the plane. I didn't say anything to you. I didn't look at you. I sat down and put on headphones. Why did you assume I was a criminal? Why did you use the word thug? Why was your immediate reaction to try and have me ejected? I was just... Patricia stammered, her eyes darting around the cabin, looking for an escape that didn't exist. It's unusual to see young people in first class. I thought, safety protocols. Stop, Leo said. It wasn't a shout, but it had the force of a slamming door. Don't lie to me, Patricia. You're an intelligent woman, supposedly. Don't insult me with garbage excuses about safety protocols. He leaned forward, his dark eyes boring into hers. You saw a black kid in a hoodie, in a space you think belongs exclusively to you, and people who look like you. You felt your status was threatened. You wanted to exert dominance. Isn't that it? Patricia looked down at her hands. A tear splashed onto her diamond ring. I made a mistake. I judged too quickly. I am distressed by the current social climate, and the current social climate didn't make you act like a monster, Leo said coldly. That was all you. You know what the irony is, Patricia? He sat back, crossing his arms. The ticket for this seat? The $12,000 you mentioned? It didn't cost me anything. The airline gave it to me as a courtesy because I'm saving them so much money. But you? You paid full price. And where did that money come from? Leo glanced at Thomas. Gerald Gables. He runs a hedge fund that specializes in what? Shorting tech stocks? Thomas nodded slowly, a cruel smile playing on his lips. That is correct. Gerald bets against innovation. Leo turned back to Patricia. Your husband makes his money by betting that people like me will fail. He bets against the future. And today, the future was sitting across the aisle from you, and you tried to throw it off the plane. Patricia began to openly weep. Please. I don't know what you want me to say. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't hurt my husband. He had nothing to do with this. Leo watched her cry with the detached curiosity of a scientist. I haven't done anything to your husband, Patricia. Yet. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a sleek, silver laptop. He opened it. The screen illuminated his face in the dim cabin. You know? Leo murmured, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The satellite Wi-Fi on this plane is surprisingly robust. Thomas really spared no expense. Patricia stared at the laptop, a fresh wave of terror washing over her. What? What are you doing? You mentioned your husband knows the vice president of operations, Leo said, not looking up from the screen. That's cute. I'm currently emailing the board of directors of the 3 largest banks that entrust your husband with their capital. And I'm CCing Thomas. Thomas held up his smartphone, showing an incoming email notification. Received. No, Patricia whispered, her face draining of all blood. Oh God, no, please. I'm just sharing a customer service experience, Leo said calmly. I'm telling them how the wife of Gerald Gables represents his brand in public. I'm attaching an audio file. Leo tapped a key. Suddenly, Patricia's own voice, shrill and hateful, echoed through the quiet first-class cabin, from Leo's laptop speakers. "Look at him. He looks like a thug. He probably used a stolen credit card." I did not pay to sit next to the help. It was the recording she had made on her own phone. Leo had hacked it. "How?" she gasped. "I told you," Leo said, closing the laptop with a soft click. "I built the systems this plane is flying on. Digital proximity is a wonderful thing." He looked at the shivering, broken woman on the ottoman. "The email is drafted, Patricia. It hasn't been sent yet. Whether I press send depends entirely on the next 5 hours." He pointed towards the back of the plane. "Go back to your middle seat. Think about what it means to belong, and pray that I'm in a better mood when we land in London." Patricia stood up on shaking legs. She looked like she had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Without a word, completely defeated, she turned and stumbled back through the curtain towards the economy section, carrying the weight of her entire privileged world crumbling on her shoulders. Leo let out a long sigh and rubbed his eyes. "Ruthless," Thomas murmured appreciatively. "You didn't even send it?" "Not yet," Leo said, closing his eyes. "The anticipation of the execution is always worse than the execution itself. Let her sweat for a few hours. Then we'll see about Gerald." He put his headphones back on. "Wake me when lunch is served." Thomas Wright watched the young man drift off to sleep. He took another sip of his scotch and looked out the window at the endless clouds below. He almost felt sorry for Gerald Gables. Almost. The man was about to find out that his wife had just written a check that his entire career couldn't cash. The real storm wasn't outside the plane. It was sitting in seat 1A, resting up for the landing. The descent into London Heathrow is usually a turbulent affair, with the aircraft cutting through layers of thick, grey British cloud. But for Patricia Gables, the turbulence inside her mind was far worse than anything the atmosphere could throw at her. She had spent 6.5 hours squeezed into seat 14 or D. The crying toddler had eventually fallen asleep, but the large man next to her had not. He had spilled tomato juice on her skirt during the meal service, a meal she had refused to eat out of sheer nausea. Every minute of the flight, her mind had replayed Leo's threat. The email, the audio recording, the "see you out" to Thomas Wright. She kept checking her watch. Every second brought them closer to the ground, closer to the moment her phone would reconnect to the cellular network, and closer to her potential doom. She had spent the flight bargaining with God. "If I get out of this," she prayed, "I will donate to charity. I will be nicer to the maids. Just don't let him send that email." As the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom announcing their final approach, Patricia felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe the boy was bluffing. He was just 17 after all. Maybe he had fallen asleep and forgotten. Maybe Thomas Wright had talked him out of it to avoid a public scandal involving his airline. The wheels touched down with a jolt. The reverse thrusters roared, slowing the massive beast of a plane. Ping. The seatbelt sign flicked off. Patricia scrambled to retrieve her phone from her bag. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped it twice. She finally pressed the power button. The Apple logo appeared. She held her breath. The screen lit up. Usually, after a transatlantic flight, one expects a handful of notifications, a few texts from family, maybe a work email or two. Patricia's phone didn't just ping. It vibrated violently, a continuous, unwavering buzz that felt like it was going to explode in her hand. The notifications cascaded down the screen in a blur of white banners. 47 missed calls from Gerald, 12 missed calls from Gables Capital Legal, 8 missed calls from PR Crisis Team, 150 plus, new text messages. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She unlocked the phone and went straight to her messages. The most recent one was from her husband, sent 3 minutes ago. Gerald. Do not speak to anyone. Do not exit the terminal. Lawyers are meeting you at the gate. You have ruined us. Patricia gasped, a strangled sound that made the passengers around her look away in discomfort. She tried to call him back, but the signal was jammed. She opened her news feed. Her thumb hovered over the Twitter X icon. She pressed it. The top trending topic in the United States and the United Kingdom was "No Seat 1A Boy." The second trending topic was Zenith Airways. The third was "Cut Patricia Gables is over." Her blood ran cold. She clicked the first hashtag. It wasn't Leo who had leaked it. It was Roger, the tech CEO in seat 2A, the man Patricia had told to mind his own business. Hadn't just been watching. He had been live streaming. Or rather, he had recorded the entire interaction in the lounge and the initial confrontation on the plane before the doors closed, and he had uploaded it the second the plane reached cruising altitude using the high-speed Wi-Fi Leo had praised. The video had been up for 7 hours. It had 12 million views. The caption read, "Witnessed absolute bravery today on Zenith Flight 404. When Apex Leo stood his ground against the worst kind of entitlement. Patricia Gables tried to kick a genius off a plane because of his hoodie. Watch the owner of the airline shut her down. The internet had done the rest. In the 7 hours Patricia had been sitting in the dark, the world had dissected her life. They had found her charity galas, her husband's firm, her address, everything. But it was the audio that Leo had captured, the crystal clear recording of her calling him a thug that had been released in a follow-up post by a leak account associated with anonymous hacktivists. Patricia felt bile rise in her throat. She stood up, desperate to get off the plane, to hide, to run. But she was in row 14. She had to wait. Up in first class, the atmosphere was very different. Leo Banks woke up as the plane taxied to the gate. He stretched, feeling refreshed. He picked up his phone and saw the notifications. He saw Roger's tweet. He saw the chaos. He looked across the aisle at Thomas Wright. Thomas was putting away his iPad. He looked grim, but satisfied. "It seems," Thomas said, checking his own phone, "that our friend Roger in 2A has a significant social media following." "I noticed," Leo said, unbuckling his seatbelt. "I didn't even have to send the email." "Oh, the email wouldn't have mattered compared to this," Thomas noted, looking at a stock ticker on his screen. Gables Capital is down 14% in pre-market trading. Their two biggest pension fund clients just issued statements saying they are reviewing their relationship with the firm due to values misalignment. Gerald is losing millions by the minute. Leo grabbed his backpack and his sketchbook. Karma is efficient. "It is when it has high-speed internet," Thomas agreed. He stood up and grabbed his cane. "After you, Mr. Banks. I believe you have a merger to sign." The landing gear of the Airbus A350 deployed with a heavy, mechanical thud that reverberated through the cabin floor, signaling the end of the 7-hour journey. For most passengers, this sound meant arrival, a hotel bed, a reunion with family, or the excitement of London. For Patricia Gables in seat 4NR-D, it sounded like a gavel slamming down in a courtroom. She had spent the last hour of the flight in a state of catatonic dread. The cabin crew, under strict orders from Thomas Wright, had ignored her completely, bypassing her row during the final trash collection. She was an island of misery in a sea of indifferent travelers. When the plane finally taxied off the runway and the engines whined down to a standstill at the gate, Patricia didn't move. She couldn't. Her legs felt like lead. She knew what was waiting for her on the other side of that door. Her phone, which she had clutched so tightly her knuckles were white, was now buzzing incessantly with a rhythm that felt like a countdown. Up in the front of the plane, the atmosphere was markedly different. Leo Banks stood up and stretched, his joints popping satisfyingly after the long flight. He looked fresh, unbothered, and ready for business. He pulled his charcoal hoodie over his head, adjusting it comfortably. It wasn't a disguise, it was his uniform. It was a statement that he refused to change who he was to fit into a room he already owned. Thomas Wright stood beside him, buttoning his bespoke suit jacket. He looked out the window at the grey London drizzle and then back at Leo. "The jet bridge is connecting," Thomas said, his voice grave but laced with a hint of dark amusement. "I suspect the reception committee will be enthusiastic." "I'm not really one for red carpets," Leo replied, hoisting his backpack onto one shoulder. "In this case, Leo, I don't think the cameras are for you," Thomas said. "At least not for the reasons you think. You're the hero of this narrative. But the media? They love a villain's downfall more than a hero's rise." The chime sounded, and the seatbelt sign extinguished. "After you, Mr. Banks," Thomas gestured. They stepped out of the aircraft and into the cool, damp air of the jet bridge. The tunnel was lined with advertisements for HSBC, but Leo didn't see them. He was focused on the end of the tunnel, where a chaotic noise was already audible. It sounded like the roar of a distant ocean. As they emerged into the gate area of Terminal 3, the world exploded into white light. It was an ambush. A phalanx of photographers and reporters had set up a barricade just beyond the customs checkpoint, but the most aggressive paparazzi had managed to get right up to the gate exit. The moment Leo and Thomas appeared, the shouting began. "Mr. Wright! Mr. Wright! A statement on the discrimination suit. Leo, over here, look this way. Did she threaten you? Leo, tell us about the algorithm. Is it true you own the airline's tech now?" Leo instinctively ducked his head, shielding his eyes from the blinding strobes. He felt a heavy hand on his shoulder. It was Thomas's head of security, a massive man named Graves, who had materialized from the waiting area. "Straight ahead, sir. Don't stop. Don't answer," Graves rumbled. They cut through the crowd like an icebreaker ship. Leo kept his expression neutral, though his heart was racing. He wasn't afraid, but the sheer volume of attention was disorienting. He was a coder, a builder, a guy who liked quiet rooms and dark screens. This noise was the price of visibility. Then the dynamic of the crowd shifted. The cameras swung away from Leo and Thomas, swiveling back toward the jet bridge door like a pack of wolves sensing a wounded animal. Patricia Gables had emerged. She looked wrecked. The woman who had boarded in New York looking like a queen was now a trembling mess. Her expensive hair was flat. Her eyes were hidden behind dark glasses that couldn't conceal the puffiness of her face, and she was clutching her Chanel bag to her chest as if it contained the last remnants of her dignity. The roar of the press redoubled, turning feral. "Mrs. Gables! Patricia! Is it true you called him a thug? Mrs. Gables, are you aware your husband has been suspended? Look here, Patricia. Cry for the camera." She flinched physically at the questions. She stopped, looking around wildly for help, for a friendly face, for a path through the madness. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please let me through." "Mrs. Gables." A reporter from a tabloid shoved a microphone within inches of her face. "Comment on the video. 12 million views, love. You're famous." Patricia let out a sob, covering her face with her hand. She tried to push forward, but the wall of bodies was impenetrable. She was drowning in the consequences of her own actions. Suddenly, 3 men in severe black suits sliced through the mob. They didn't look like airport security. They moved with the cold, predatory efficiency of corporate sharks. The lead man, tall with graying hair and eyes like flint, stepped directly into Patricia's path. "Mrs. Gables," the man said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the din instantly. Patricia looked up, hope flashing across her face. "Mr. Sterling. Oh, thank God. Did Gerald send you? Get me out of here. These people are animals." Mr. Sterling didn't move to protect her. He didn't offer her a coat or a comforting hand. He stood at a remove, maintaining a professional, icy distance. "I am here on behalf of the Board of Directors of Gables Capital," Sterling stated, his tone flat. "I am here to escort you to a secure location." "Yes, yes. Take me to Gerald." "Take me home," Patricia pleaded, reaching for his sleeve. Sterling took a half-step back, avoiding her touch. "You are not going to the residence, Mrs. Gables. The London townhouse is a corporate asset. As of 9 a.m. this morning, access to all corporate assets for family members of executive staff has been revoked pending the internal investigation." Patricia froze. The flashes continued to pop, capturing her confusion in high definition. "What? What are you talking about? Where is my husband?" "Mr. Gables is currently in a deposition with the Securities and Exchange Commission via video link," Sterling said, delivering the news as if reading a grocery list. "The release of the audio recording from the flight triggered a liquidity crisis. 2 major sovereign wealth funds pulled their capital an hour ago. The firm is in freefall. Mr. Gables has instructed us to inform you that he is filing for a legal separation effective immediately to protect whatever personal assets remain." The air left Patricia's lungs. It was a physical blow. She staggered, dropping her Chanel bag. It hit the floor with a heavy thud, and nobody moved to pick it up. "Separation?" she gasped. "But it was just an argument on a plane." "It was a brand toxicity event," Sterling corrected her ruthlessly. "You have become a liability that Gables Capital cannot afford. You are toxic, Patricia. Now please come with us. We have booked you a room at the Airport Ibis Hotel for 1 night. After that, you are on your own." "The Ibis!" She looked at him with horror. I don't stay at—" "It is what is available," Sterling snapped. He signaled to his associates. "Grab her bag. Let's go." The lawyers flanked her, not as guards but as captors. They marched her away, through the jeering crowd, away from the first-class lounge, away from the luxury she had worshipped, and toward the exit for the shuttle buses. Patricia Gables walked with her head bowed, stripped of her armor, her husband, her home, and her pride, all in the span of a single transatlantic flight. High above the chaos, in the serene, glass-walled private sanctuary of the Zenith Airways VIP arrival lounge, Leo Banks watched the scene unfold on a large television screen. The lounge was quiet. The smell of jasmine tea and fresh pastries filled the air. Thomas Wright stood next to Leo, holding a crystal tumbler of water. "Brutal," Thomas murmured, watching the footage of Patricia stumbling toward the exit. Gerald didn't waste a second cutting her loose. "He's a hedge fund manager," Leo said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "He cuts losses. That's what he does. She was just a bad stock." Leo turned away from the screen. He looked tired now. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the exhaustion of the journey and the weight of the victory. "You handled yourself well today, Leo," Thomas said, turning to face the young prodigy. "Better than most men twice your age. You didn't just win. You won with dignity. That's rare." "I didn't want to win, Thomas. I just wanted to fly," Leo replied, looking down at his worn-out sneakers. "I just wanted to get to the meeting." Thomas smiled warmly. "Speaking of the meeting, my driver is downstairs. The Bentley is waiting. We can drop your bags at the Dorchester, get you freshened up, and head to the signing." Leo hesitated. He looked at the luxury lounge, the expensive furniture, the obsequious staff waiting to refill his tea. Then he thought about the hostel in Shoreditch, The noise, the graffiti, the energy of people who were hungry for the future, not resting on the past. "Thomas," Leo said, tightening the strap of his backpack, "I think I'm going to skip the Bentley." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "The Heathrow Express is efficient, I suppose, but hardly fitting for the owner of Apex Solutions." "It's not about that," Leo said. "I need to clear my head. I want to take the train. I want to walk a bit. And I booked a bed at a hostel on Curtin Road. I'm going to stay there." Thomas looked genuinely shocked. "A hostel? Leo, you just closed a deal that makes you one of the wealthiest teenagers in Europe. You can buy the hotel?" "I know." Leo smiled, and this time the smile reached his eyes. "But if I start living like them, like Patricia, I might start thinking like them. I might start thinking I'm better than everyone else. I need to remember where I started. I need to remember what it feels like to be invisible." Thomas stared at him for a long moment, and then a look of profound respect settled on the older man's face. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek black titanium card with the Zenith Falcon logo embossed in silver. "I understand," Thomas said softly. "You're a rare breed, Leo Banks. But take this. It's a Zenith Infinite status card. If you ever need a flight, a lounge, or just a quiet place to think, anywhere in the world, this opens the door. No questions asked. And if anyone ever blocks your path again, well, they answer to me." Leo took the card, feeling its weight. "Thanks, Thomas. I appreciate it." "Call my secretary when you're ready to sign the papers," Thomas said, extending his hand. Leo shook it firmly. "I will. See you tomorrow." Leo turned and walked out of the VIP lounge. He bypassed the private elevator for diplomats and celebrities. He took the escalator down to the main concourse, merging into the stream of regular travelers, backpackers, families, tired businessmen. He walked past the newsstand where the evening papers were already being racked. The front page of the Evening Standard screamed, "High-altitude meltdown, Gable's empire crashes." Leo didn't stop to read it. He adjusted his headphones, scrolling through his playlist until he found the track he wanted. Something with a heavy bass line and a driving rhythm. He stepped onto the platform for the Heathrow Express, finding a seat near the window in the standard carriage. As the train pulled away, gathering speed toward central London, Leo leaned his head against the glass. He watched the grey city rush by, a blur of concrete and green. He was alone, anonymous, just a kid in a hoodie on a train. But he knew something the other passengers didn't. He knew that the world was changing. He knew that the old guard, with their diamonds and their cruelty, was brittle. And he knew that the future belonged to those who built, not those who bullied. He closed his eyes and finally, truly, smiled. This story is a powerful reminder that in the age of information, character is your most valuable currency. Leo Banks didn't need to shout to prove his worth. His actions, his intelligence, and his integrity spoke louder than any title ever could. Patricia Gables learned the ultimate lesson. When you try to crush others to elevate yourself, you often end up destroying the very foundation you stand on. It's a classic tale of arrogance meeting competence and the satisfying crash that follows. If this story of high-flying justice and instant karma resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps us bring more stories like this to life. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. Share this with a friend who needs a reminder that kindness costs nothing, but rudeness can cost you everything. Thanks for watching, and stay humble.